December 1944. In the frozen forests of the Ardennes, German soldiers huddled in their foxholes, waiting for the American artillery to stop. But something was different this time. The shells weren't hitting the ground. They were exploding directly overhead, raining lethal fragments down with devastating precision. "It's as if they can see us," one German soldier wrote. An impossible rain of steel. What these soldiers didn't know was that they were experiencing one of the most closely guarded secrets of World War II, a revolutionary device smaller than a light bulb that would transform modern warfare and help secure Allied victory. Before World War II, shooting down enemy planes was nearly impossible. Bombers flew too high and too fast. Anti-aircraft guns fired thousands of shells, but less than 5% ever hit their targets. The problem was simple to understand but devilishly hard to solve. A bomber flying at 250 miles per hour moves over 360 feet every second. Anti-aircraft shells traveled at roughly 2,700 feet per second. Gunners had to guess where these two objects would meet in the sky. They had two bad options. Contact fuses would only explode when directly hitting an aircraft, like threading a needle while blindfolded. Time fuses required gunners to estimate exactly how many seconds until the shell reached the plane's altitude, then manually set each shell before firing. "We might as well be throwing rocks at them," one naval officer wrote after watching his shells burst harmlessly around Japanese planes. For naval vessels, this wasn't just embarrassing, it was deadly. A single bomber breaking through defenses could sink an entire ship. As Japanese planes attacked Pearl Harbor and German bombers pounded London, military planners faced a terrifying truth. Without better anti-aircraft weapons, naval battles could be lost regardless of how powerful the ships were. What they needed was a shell that could think for itself, one that would detect when it was near an aircraft, and detonate automatically. The Navy's urgent need for protecting its ships would lead to one of the most secretive and ambitious scientific undertakings of the war, hidden away in a laboratory at Johns Hopkins University. In 1940, while German bombs fell on London, the U.S. Navy created a special team called Section T at Johns Hopkins University. Their mission seemed impossible. Build a tiny radar that could fit inside an artillery shell, survive being fired from a cannon, and explode automatically when near an enemy plane. Physicist Merle Tuve led this desperate effort. "I knew we had to get this into the hands of the fleet before another Pearl Harbor happened," he later recalled. His team faced a problem no one had solved before: how to make delicate electronics survive forces 20,000 times stronger than gravity. Every early test ended in failure. Vacuum tubes shattered. Batteries leaked acid. Components broke into pieces upon firing. Military leaders began questioning whether the project was worth continuing. Everyone held their breath as the shell screamed skyward, hoping for the telltale burst near the drone. Wrote Ralph Baldwin, one of the key scientists. When tests failed, the team would collect the broken pieces and start again, working through nights and weekends. James Van Allen, who would later discover the radiation belts around Earth, joined the team to make the electronics tougher. They tried hundreds of designs, scavenging radio parts from local stores when supplies ran short. The British were working on similar technology. William Buteman and Samuel Curran shared ideas with the Americans while racing to solve the same problems. This wasn't friendly competition. It was a desperate race to save ships and sailors. Admiral Blandy worried about putting radio devices on warships. "What if they explode by accident?" he asked in one tense meeting. "We'll have ships blowing themselves up." But Section T persisted. They reinforced vacuum tubes with ceramic materials. They designed batteries that would activate only during firing, using the shell's acceleration to mix chemicals and generate electricity at the exact moment it was needed. After months of frustrating failures, they finally succeeded. The Proximity Fuze was born, a tiny radar that could detect objects nearby and trigger an explosion at the perfect moment. The breakthrough was electrifying. But now they faced an even bigger challenge: how to turn a handmade laboratory device into millions of weapons for the war effort. Making one proximity fuse in a lab was hard. Making millions required an industrial miracle. In 1942, America's biggest electronics companies joined a secret manufacturing network. Eastman Kodak, RCA, and Sylvania converted assembly lines that once made radios and cameras into fuse factories. Workers assembled parts without knowing what they were building. "We were told it was important for the war," recalled one factory worker. "But we had no idea we were making something that could withstand forces 20,000 times that of gravity." Security was intense. Guards watched factory floors. Workers built components in separate buildings. No one saw the complete device except a few engineers. Most employees only learned what they had been making after the war ended. William McLean designed machines that could test thousands of fuses per day. Each device needed to work perfectly the first time in combat. There would be no second chances. Early prototypes cost between $100-$100-$100- $200 each, but mass production dropped the price to just $18. The scale was staggering. By war's end, American factories produced 22 million proximity fuses, more than all the cars made in the previous decade. At peak production, over 40,000 fuses rolled off assembly lines every day. Women made up most of the production workforce. Their smaller hands and attention to detail proved perfect for the delicate assembly work. They soldered tiny wires and positioned components smaller than grains of rice, all while meeting increasingly demanding production quotas. The manufacturing effort represented something the Axis powers couldn't match: America's ability to mass-produce complex technology while maintaining strict quality standards. German scientists might design impressive weapons, but American factories could make millions of them. With production ramping up to unprecedented levels, the new weapon was ready for its combat debut, but its first deployment would be kept as secret as its development. January 5, 1943. The USS Helena patrolled the waters near the Solomon Islands. Lookouts spotted Japanese bombers approaching. The captain gave the order: "Load the special ammunition." For the first time in combat, proximity fuse shells flew toward enemy aircraft. Sailors watched in amazement as shells exploded near Japanese planes without direct hits. The bombers tumbled from the sky. "The gunners cheered with every burst," reported one officer. This wasn't just luck. It was technology changing the rules of war in real time. Admiral William Halsey had authorized this first combat use after months of debate. Military leaders worried about the consequences if the Japanese captured a dud shell. The security measures were extreme. Orders stated that any ship in danger of capture must sink itself to protect the secret weapon. Before proximity fuses, ship gunners hit enemy planes less than 5% of the time. Now, their success rate jumped to 25 to 30%. A five-fold improvement that translated directly into saved American lives and ships. Japanese pilots noticed the change immediately. "The Americans have a new weapon," one captured pilot told interrogators. "Their shells follow us in the sky." In post-war interviews, surviving Japanese aviators described their confusion at seeing explosions all around them without direct hits. Naval battles throughout 1943 confirmed the fuse's effectiveness. During the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944, ships using proximity fuses reported up to 50% more confirmed kills than those using conventional ammunition. Ship logs documented the dramatic improvement. The USS South Dakota shot down 8 attackers in one engagement. The USS Enterprise's gunners described the difference as night and day compared to previous defensive capabilities. But military leaders maintained strict rules. Proximity fuses could only be used over water, where duds would sink to the ocean floor beyond enemy reach. The weapon remained limited to naval use throughout 1943 and early 1944. While the Proximity Fuze was proving its worth at sea, military planners were about to discover its even more devastating potential on land, an application that would shock even its inventors. December 16, 1944. Hitler launched his last major offensive in the West. The Battle of the Bulge. German forces pushed through the Ardennes forest, catching American troops by surprise. The situation grew desperate as German tanks broke through Allied lines. General Dwight Eisenhower faced a critical decision: keep the Proximity Fuze restricted to naval use, or risk deploying it on land where the Germans might capture it. The stakes couldn't be higher. If the Germans learned the secret, they could copy it or develop countermeasures. But with American forces on the verge of defeat, Eisenhower made the call: release the VT fuses for artillery use. This emergency authorization changed the course of the battle, and possibly the war. American artillery batteries began firing Proximity Fuze shells that exploded in the air above German positions. Unlike ground-burst shells that allowed troops to take cover in foxholes, these airbursts rained fragments downward with nowhere to hide. The effect was devastating. German infantry, caught in the open during their advance, suffered horrific casualties. One German soldier's diary described the experience: the American shells explode before they hit the ground. There is nowhere to take cover. It is an impossible rain of steel. The winter conditions created new challenges. Section T engineers rushed to modify the fuses with chemical heaters to ensure reliable operation in freezing temperatures. These adaptations reached the front lines just in time to help halt the German advance. General George Patton, whose Third Army relieved the besieged forces at Bastogne, witnessed the effect firsthand. "The new shell with the funny fuse won the war for us," he declared. This wasn't mere exaggeration. American artillery with proximity fuses could achieve with one battalion what previously required 3 or more using conventional ammunition. By January 1945, the German offensive had been stopped and pushed back. The Proximity Fuze had proven itself not just as an anti-aircraft weapon, but as a revolution in ground warfare. What began as a defensive technology for ships had become one of the most lethal offensive weapons of the war. As the Germans retreated from the Ardennes, the Proximity Fuze would face one more crucial test: defending London against Hitler's last vengeance weapon. Summer 1944. London faced a terrifying new threat: Hitler's 5-1 buzz bombs. These pilotless flying bombs carried a ton of explosives each, buzzing overhead until their engines cut out, signaling their deadly descent into neighborhoods below. Conventional anti-aircraft guns proved nearly useless against these small, fast-moving targets. Gunners hit less than 10% of incoming V1s. Londoners watched helplessly as the mechanical harbingers of death approached their homes. British commanders desperately requested American proximity fuses. Military leaders again faced the security dilemma. Using the fuses over land meant risking capture by German forces. But with civilian casualties mounting daily, they made the difficult choice to deploy the secret weapon. The results were immediate and dramatic. Anti-aircraft batteries equipped with proximity fuses began knocking V1s from the sky at unprecedented rates. Interception rates soared from less than 10% to between 40 to 50%. For every 10 buzz bombs launched toward London, 4 to 5 were now destroyed before reaching their targets. It was like fireworks. Only these fireworks saved lives, recalled one London resident. People gathered on rooftops to watch the spectacle of V1s exploding mid-air, cheering each successful interception. The human impact was immense. Thousands of civilian lives were saved as fewer bombs reached populated areas. Hospital admissions from bomb injuries dropped sharply. Children who had been evacuated began returning to the city as the threat diminished. British anti-aircraft commanders adapted quickly, creating a defensive belt around southern England. They positioned guns in overlapping zones of fire, maximizing the effectiveness of the new technology. One commander noted, "What once seemed hopeless is now winnable. We can actually defend the city." The Proximity Fuze had proven its worth in three distinct roles: protecting ships from aircraft, devastating ground troops with artillery, and now defending civilians from robot bombs. This versatility validated the enormous investment in its development and production. As the war drew to a close, the full impact of this tiny electronic marvel would finally be assessed, not just as a weapon, but as a harbinger of a new technological age. The Proximity Fuze transformed warfare in ways its inventors never imagined. What began as a desperate solution for naval defense became a versatile weapon that saved countless Allied lives, devastated enemy forces, and demonstrated America's unmatched industrial might. The numbers tell part of the story. 22 million Proximity Fuses produced by war's end. Anti-aircraft effectiveness increased fivefold. V1 interception rates jumped from less than 10% to 40 to 50%. But statistics alone can't capture the full impact. For sailors on ships who no longer watched helplessly as enemy planes approached, the fuse meant survival. For soldiers in the Ardennes who witnessed German advances halted by precision artillery, it meant victory. For London civilians who saw buzz bombs explode harmlessly overhead, it meant life instead of death. Beyond its immediate military impact, the Proximity Fuze project established new ways for government, universities, and industry to work together. The model created at Section T would influence how America approached technology development throughout the Cold War and beyond. Merle Tuve reflected years later, "We didn't just build a better weapon. We proved that in the modern age, the nation that best harnesses its scientific and industrial capabilities will prevail." The scientist who created the Proximity Fuze went on to shape America's technological future. James Van Allen discovered the radiation belts around Earth that bear his name. William McLean later invented the Sidewinder missile. The miniaturization techniques they pioneered influenced everything from space exploration to consumer electronics. Perhaps most importantly, the Proximity Fuze represented a new kind of warfare, one where precision replaced brute force, where smart weapons could accomplish what mountains of explosives could not. In the shadow of more famous technologies like radar and the atomic bomb, this humble, funny fuse may well have been the most underrated game-changer of World War II. Its story reminds us that wars are won not just by courage and sacrifice on the battlefield, but by innovation in laboratories and relentless production in factories. The Proximity Fuze stands as one of history's most perfect marriages of scientific ingenuity and industrial might. A weapon that killed by precision rather than brute force. And a testament to how the outcome of modern warfare is determined not just on battlefields, but in laboratories and factories. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe for more fascinating World War II historical deep dives every week. Thanks for watching.